of philosophers followed his lectures. A bunch of philosophers that molded philosophy and history of philosophy in the 20th century followed his lessons. Among them, we can remember Hannah Arendt, or Bataille, or Sartre. But Hannah Arendt accused him of plagiarizing. Bataille said he was falling asleep during his lectures, and Sartre that he had even forgotten about participating to those lessons. But the truth is that Alexander KOJèVE is the point in common, the reference, the hidden reference for many philosophers, from Hannah Arendt to Sartre, from Bataille to Simone de Beauvoir, from Lacan to Foucault. The point in common, but no credit is given to him. No explicit credit is given to him. He was thought to be at the same time many different things. He was thought to be a Russian-born aristocrat, nephew of Kandinsky, French civil servant, architect of the EU, Vedanta scholar, polymath, philosophy professor, French resistance fighter, Soviet spy, born as Alexander Vladimirovich Kojève. KOJèVE changed name once he emigrated from Russia. He was born in 1902, and his story, his childhood story, resembles one of those magic, incredibly sad, with an absurd twist at the end story narrated by Dostoevsky. He was accused as a teenager of selling soap at a black market, and as such he was caught and he was ready to be gunned down. Basically, there was a whole firing squad that was ready to kill this young boy. But his mother knew Lenin's physician, and that is how, at 15 years old, KOJèVE, Alexander Vladimirovich Kojève, who would change his last name once in France into KOJèVE, that is how this young boy sort of like changed his destiny, because at this point Lenin's physician intervened and his whole destiny changed. So he moves out of Russia, goes to France. In France, he studies for around 9 years. There's also a period of time in which he studies with Jaspers. And then, at a certain point, the money ran out. When he ran out, he knew KOJèVE. And KOJèVE says, listen, I have Hegel's seminars. They're gonna be only for 1 year, but this is a nice break. You could sort of breathe. We'll pay you. What do you think about like becoming philosophy professor? And so that is what happened. Eventually, these Hegel seminars would not last 1 year. They would last 6 years. In 1941, due to Germany invasion, he would go to Marseille, stay in Marseille, and then eventually he would be called as part of the Ministry of Economy in building the new France after Nazism and the Second World War. He was described as charming, secretive, and terrifying. He was also describing himself as Stalin's conscience. But why is this guy, Alexander KOJèVE, known as Alexander KOJèVE, so important in the history of philosophy? It's very simple. He was the greatest interpreter of the phenomenology written by Hegel. One of the hardest, the most complicated, and the most obscure Hegel's work. To the point that Hegel himself said of his own writing that nobody really had understood it. That there was only one person, but even that person didn't know he understood his piece, right? And it's one of the things we all study. For instance, when we study philosophy, this dialectic between the master and the slave. What does that mean besides history? Because it's the history of the conscience. So what is the role of the dialectic between master and slave? What does that really mean? So what KOJèVE does is an act that has been defined as transformative, creative, but also violent. It's a violent interpretation that KOJèVE gives because moves the center. For Hegel, the center was the totality. The center was the entire history. The center was collectivity. For KOJèVE, in his violent interpretation, the center is the individual. KOJèVE writes, one risks their life for something that is not essential. The one who shrinks before the other in fear of death, he will become a slave. The one who's willing to die, he will become a master. But what is really talking about? Well, he's talking about the fact that one could be willing and is willing to risk his biological life to satisfy his non-biological desire. What KOJèVE understands, which is so fundamental for philosophy in the 20th century, end of the 19th, most of all 19th and 20th century, what KOJèVE really understands is that one key to interpret Hegel's work is to substitute at the center and place at the center the concept of desire. If we stop looking at the collectivity, okay, and if we interpret the collectivity as just the adventure of the conscious of the conscience of the individual, and if we start to interpret conscience as the conscience of the individual, then the fundamental core of that conscience that determines actions, thoughts, and willingness is the concept of desire. But what is really desire? Desire, in Lacan's words, is the desire of the other's desire. In other words, what a desire wants is satisfaction. It is the hunger one feels to fill the absence, and therefore desire is the presence of the absence. It is the awareness or the realization of the awareness that we do have a void inside, and that void might take different shapes, might configure itself as in I want this, I want that. But what that really means is that the other has to be subjugated. That is why he was saying we're willing to risk our biological life for our non-biological desire. But desire is something innate and even more stronger than us wanting to live. In the end, we want to live because we have desire. When people are depressed, they don't have desires, they don't have aspirations. That is also when life takes a different color, especially like in our heads. So it is the concept of desire that is so much the center of philosophy, and that is why KOJèVE is so fundamental in a way that is either direct or indirect. For instance, if you pick Foucault, right? Everything in Foucault revolves around this relationship between desire and power. How power is intrinsically pertinent to the concept of desire. If you think about Lacan and the mirror stage, just to mention one concept of desire, that is the same when you think about Sartre or Simone de Beauvoir. You still have the concept of desire. And the lack that the desire represents at the center of philosophy. And so it is this concept, starting from Hegel, from a very individualistic standpoint, as the adventures of desire, as the power and the luck that desire expresses, they will mark philosophy I would say in the 20th century. It's not that in 21st century we are much far away from that. I think we're still in that loop. Or some philosophy is still in that loop, right? Figuring out the meaning, the purpose of desire. Philosophically understand and speculating on desire. Anyway, guys, with that being said, I want to hear your thoughts. So let us know, comment below. And if you have enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk next time.